Sometimes the road signs lie. A few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a road trip for a family reunion in El Paso, Texas. I'm now sitting in the hospital waiting room wishing we hadn't. How much longer? Melanie asked, leaning her seat back and putting her hand into the small of her back in a feeble attempt to find a more comfortable position. Google says we got a few more hours to go, I said, glancing quickly at my phone and sitting in the cup holder, then putting my eyes back on the road. Do we need to stop again? Melanie shifted in her seat a bit, removed her hand from behind her, then sat it back up to its original vertical position. At 7 months pregnant, her options for comfort were quickly dwindling, and none of them involved getting in the front seat of a car. No, let's just go. If we stop again, I'm not going to want to get back into the car. Signal lost, my phone's robotic female voice announced. God damn it, I sighed. The phone had been doing that for the past couple of hours, at increasing intervals. There had apparently been an accident or something on the main highway, which would have backed us up by at least an hour according to the all-knowing Google. In order to avoid that, we'd taken a detour that snaked around the accident, through the desert on a 2-lane highway that had been there 3 hours ago, maybe more. It was hard to keep track of when it happened, because even before the phone had alerted us of the accident, the whole trip had been a little more than a palette of browns and grays broken up only by the regular bathroom break. As I saw it, the New Mexico desert was the skid mark on the underpants of America, and I had never had the pleasure of driving through it again. It would be too soon. The sun had set about an hour ago, not before the signal started getting more spotty, and the highway hypnosis had really started to get to me. There was nothing but desert on either side of us, and even with the high beams on, the darkness covered us like a thick blanket. Got any more Red Bulls? I asked. If we're gonna go a few more hours, I need some wings. Melanie reached into the back seat for a second, grunting with discomfort, then returned with a can of Red Bull. Last one, she said. This was sitting on the seat so the sun warmed it up for you. Great, I said, taking the can, cracking the seal, and swallowing 3 large gulps. This will sit well with all the other junk I've been eating the past 2 days. Without a baby on the way, Mel and I could have driven the stretch between Bozeman and El Paso in 2 days without a problem. But with her being as pregnant as she was, we had to carve out almost double the time, and she was still miserable. I let out a burp that tasted like the atrocious snacks and truck stop food from that day, mixed with the warm energy drink I was laying on top, and smollenly promised myself I would eat nothing but salad and water for the rest of my life. Turn left here for the Church of Christ. I thought the Church of Christ was back there, Mel said, reading the dilapidated sign as we passed it. No, that was the Church of Jesus Christ, I said. Big difference, apparently. Although the drive, we'd seen a large variety of local churches, mostly generic, but passing one called the Church of Liberty over a backdrop of poorly drawn Confederate flag, we had turned it into a sort of game to see who could find the most outlandish one. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the engine and the intermittent signal loss notification on my phone. I had looked at the phone earlier when the signal was stronger and saw we just needed to go to the end of this road, turn right, and we'd find ourselves getting back onto the freeway. So although the intermittent announcement from the cup holder was annoying, I wasn't particularly concerned. That was until we saw the sign that said freeway entrance left 1 mile. I thought you said it was right at the end of the road, Melanie said, sitting up and grabbing the phone. That's what I said, I insisted. I checked it last time we had service like half an hour ago. We had about 60 or so miles left to go. Then it was a right. How sure are you? She asked, putting the phone back into the cup holder, because your phone is still saying it has no service, so it's not going to be any help. Pretty damn, I said. Just then, we passed another sign, freeway entrance, left, 0.5 miles. At least I think so. I think we should follow the signs, Mel said. I don't want to get lost out here, and the phone hasn't had consistent service in a while. They could have reset and changed routes or something to have us avoid the highway. Remember last time? I did remember last time, a Vegas trip that ended up being 4 hours longer than it should have been because my phone reset and had us taking frontage roads and city streets. It would have been longer had Mel not thought to check the route on her phone. I was sure that I had seen it taking us back to the highway, and that next turn was a right in about 30 minutes or so, given our current speed, but with the evidence to the contrary quickly approaching me in the darkness, illuminated by the headlights. I made the single most critical mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. I followed the street sign and turned left. Mel leaned back in her seat, embarking again on her quest for a more comfortable position, and I continued to stare at the lines in the road as we passed. Time begins to lose meaning when you've been on the road for as long as we were that night. It could have been hours we spent speeding straight down the desert road, or it could have been days. With no focal point, it was really up to the clock alone to tell us how long we've been there. And the clock on the dashboard had impeccably reset at some point, something it did on occasion for most of the time I owned that car. Another bullet for Melanie to fire at me whenever we got into our marital spats. I didn't care, she didn't really either, but it was another straw to load up on the camel's back nonetheless. My faith in the phone had begun to waver even further as I was becoming sure even the clock was running slow somehow. We'd go 5 or 6 miles according to the odometer, and the clock would read only a minute or two had passed. I drained the last little bit of my Red Bull down my throat, again promising myself nothing but clean eating after this trip was over. Moments later, I felt a dull pressure in my bowels. The last drop of liquid must have been the last straw for my bladder. Mel slept quietly next to me, having finally crashed a while back, and I made the second decision I would come to regret. Although we hadn't seen another car for miles, I flipped my hazard lights on and pulled over to the side of the road. I turned off the car and stepped out of the car and relieved myself, relishing one of the finer points of being a man and having the ability to take a leak in the middle of the road without much fanfare and return to the car. Mel stirred and then asked me if we were there yet. Not yet, just a bit further, had to take a leak. She rolled her eyes and closed them again. I turned the key to start the car back up, heard the series of clicking telling me that my car didn't have enough power to start back up. Fuck! I sighed, resting my head against the steering wheel in defeat. What's wrong? Mel asked, opening one eye. Battery's dead. What? There was a hint of panic in her voice, and she sat back up, totally awake now. But the car was just running. Yeah, it was running off the alternator. The battery needs just enough power to start. Then the car can run off the power generated by the alternator. All we need is a jump, and we should be able to get the rest of the way there, as long as we don't turn off the car. But who's gonna jump us? Mel asked. When was the last time you saw a car? It's been a while, I admitted. Definitely not since we made that turn back there. Fuck, Mel spat. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Stay here, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Where are you going? She said, the panic in her voice rising. Just up there, I said, pointing down the road. I think I see a sign 100 yards out there. It might give us an idea of which direction we need to go if we need to just wait until the sun comes up. I could tell she didn't like it, but she didn't say anything. I'll keep my flashlight on so you can see where I am. I'll just go there, then straight back. She nodded. Unless I see a Denny's, then you're on your own. She flipped me off, I kissed her cheek, and stepped out into the night. I shivered and hugged my arms down. The air was brisk, despite having been downright hot during the day, and I remember learning in science class as a kid that desert wildlife had to be tough enough to endure not only the heat during the day, but the cold, sometimes freezing temperatures at night as well. I shivered and hugged my arms around my torso and made my way down the road to where I thought I'd seen a road sign. As I approached, I realized it wasn't the kind of sign I was looking for. It was made of cracked wood that just looked a little better than the sign of the church we'd seen a while back, and painted on it was white letters. It read, Gomper's Farm, above a crudely drawn arrow pointing down a dirt path to the right. My gaze followed the arrow, and I thought I could see a light far off in the distance. A scream broke through the darkness that turned my blood to ice. Mel, I called, wheeling around and bolting back the way I came. Melanie! I could see the shape of the car in the distance, but it was too far away for my flashlight to do much good. I sprinted down the road, screaming my wife's name in a hot panic. What? Melanie called back, alarmed. I slowed when I heard her voice and held up the flashlight again. She was standing on the passenger side of the car with the door open. I thought I heard you screaming, I said through heaving breaths. She looked around, confused. No? You didn't hear that? I asked. She shook her head. No, I don't think so. I was in the car until I heard you yelling, though. Where did it come from? I don't know, I said, shaking my head and spitting the bitter flavor of adrenaline into the dirt. Maybe it was an animal or something, she suggested. What did the sign say? There's a farmhouse or something about a mile down the road, I think. But if I jog it, it could take about 10 minutes or so. If anyone's there, all that they'll have to do is give me a ride back and help us jump the car. If nobody's there, we'll probably have to wait till morning unless a car happens to pass by. She mulled it over a minute, and then I saw the resolve on her face. I knew what was coming next. I'm going with you then. I didn't like it, but I could tell arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere but the doghouse. And considering the scream I heard, or thought I heard anyway, I preferred having her close. Fine, I agreed. Grab your jacket. I'm gonna grab mine and a couple of waters. A moment later, we're hiking down the road, our silhouettes illuminated intermittently by the orange hazard lights we elected to leave on. I doubted the battery would last if those lights were on too long, but if someone was driving past, I would hate for them to miss it. Mel had thought to leave a note on the windshield telling whomever found it. We'd gone to the farmhouse and would be back shortly. If anyone was kind enough to stop, they'll hopefully see the letter and stick around long enough to help. That, or they'll know where to look for us coming back so they could take whatever they wanted out of the car before we returned. There was a cold breeze that played with our hair as we walked, not uncomfortable, but enough to make me zip up my jacket just a bit more. Mel held up the only flashlight we had, and the beam bounced up and down the darkness like a buoy. The car was barely visible when Mel shrieked so suddenly, I nearly tripped on my own foot. What? I asked, suddenly panicked. Look, she said, extending her finger past the head of the flashlight. What? It's gone now, you didn't see it? No, I was too busy asking myself why was I hiking with a pregnant banshee. There's something out there, she said, ignoring my jab. Just past that rock. I saw a pair of golden eyes. Probably a coyote, I said, starting to walk again. They're cowards. If you keep walking and talking, nothing should bug us, especially if we stick to the road here. Mel nodded and caught up to me. How much longer do you think it will take till we get to the farm? Don't know, I shrugged. 10 or 15 minutes, maybe? Just then I saw the eyes she was talking about. Out in the distance, next to the large boulder on the side of the road, sat a pair of curious golden eyes. Definitely a coyote, I said, pointing at it. You can see its shape a bit. All fours low to the ground. It looks like it might be a little bigger than the ones I've seen. But there's not much else to see out here that looks like that. That's probably what I heard earlier, too. One of those guys catching a rabbit or something. I wasn't sure I believed it, but it felt good to get some sort of explanation on the record. We kept talking as we walked down the path, closer to the eyes, and when they disappeared, I was a bit disappointed. But not surprised. Part of me wanted to see a coyote up close. But if we got close enough to see it, that meant we were probably close enough to a den, which is the last place we'd want to find ourselves. We talked about what we would do when we finally got home and how soon we find ourselves laughing about the whole ordeal. When Mel stopped suddenly in the middle of the road, shit. What is it now? I asked, looking around for another pair of eyes. I have to pee. No chance you can hold it? I asked, holding back a chuckle at the poor timing. Not unless you can talk this kid out of using my bladder as a waterbed, she replied, handing me the flashlight. Where should I go? Why not right here? Are you kidding? Not even a little bit, I said. You probably shouldn't wander too far off the trail. And it's not like anyone's around to see you anyway. Hell, if someone showed up and the universe decided now was the time to embarrass you, I'd still take that over the rest of the walk. Fine, she sighed, pulling her maternity pants down and squatting. As she did her business, I took the opportunity to scan the surroundings with a flashlight. I found a few more pairs of golden eyes on either side of the road, which quickened my pulse just a little. I didn't like being outnumbered, and I liked being surrounded even less. Melanie finished her business, and with some assistance from me to get back up to a vertical position, we were off again, our feet crunching against the dirt as we walked. I thought I heard something then, and this time it was my turn to stop. What? Mel asked. Shh, I said. I started again, then stopped. What is it? Mel whispered. Another scream? Nothing, I lied, picking the pace back up. Thought I heard a car. We walked again in silence, Mel forgetting to keep the conversation going to keep the coyotes back, and me listening too intently to think about topics to discuss. I knew I heard something behind us. I didn't notice it at first, or maybe it hadn't been there at first. But after we stopped, I could make out the faint sound of footsteps on the dirt that stopped almost as soon as we did, and picked up, or so I thought as soon as we had. I'd also heard a strange lapping sound after we started walking again, like something licking the urine off the dirt road. When the farmhouse came into view, the relief between us was palpable. We both had been too preoccupied with the growing number of eyes on either side of the road that we hadn't noticed that the light that I'd seen from the road had shut off. It was a small house, but I hadn't expected much more than what was given in the location. If it had 4 walls and a roof, I would have been happy, but from the outside I would have guessed it had at least a few bedrooms, and behind it stood a structure that looked like it may be a detached garage or a large shed of some sort. We approached the house, and I was about to walk up to the wooden porch steps when Melanie grabbed my hand. Hold on. I turned back to look at her. Her eyes were wide, and the pupils were so dilated from the darkness they were nearly black. What's wrong? Do you think this is a good idea? I rolled my eyes. If it wasn't. You could have said something 20 minutes ago. I know, I mean. She paused for a second. Do you think these people will help us? We're strangers in the middle of nowhere, and it's the middle of the night. I shrugged. I think the worst that can happen is they'll tell us to leave. They'll probably answer the door with a shotgun in hand, but who wouldn't? Melanie nodded, and I saw her throat work up and down in a dry, nervous swallow. I walked up a few steps, the wood creaking beneath my feet, leaving Melanie at the bottom. I held up my fist and raped 3 times on the storm door. We waited, listening intently for sounds in the inside of the house. Instead, I heard what sounded like the soft padded feet of a coyote in the dirt behind us. They were known for being incredibly quiet. That thought didn't make me feel much better. I opened the storm door, knocked again, this time on the wooden door. The sound carried far better, but again we heard nothing but silence. I think we should go, Melanie said. Something isn't right. The knot in my stomach agreed and turned to leave just as the door opened. Who's there? A man's voice said. He hadn't turned the light on in the house, so when I turned around, I could see a silhouette in the dark, illuminated only by the ambient glow of Melanie's flashlight that was pointed directly at my back. I'm sorry to bother you, sir. My name is Matthew Hallwell, and this is my wife, Melanie. Our car died down the road, and we were hoping you could give us a jump. No, the man said under his breath. No, 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 no. Sorry, I said, thinking I misheard him. Sorry, no, we cannot jump your car tonight. It'll have to wait till morning. Sir, I'm sorry to impose, but we really can't. A twig snapped behind me, very quiet, but clear nonetheless. Please come inside, the man said. You'll stay here tonight. I turned to look at Melanie, who was already walking up the steps. The man opened the door wider to let us in and clicked on the light in the hallway, bathing us in a glow that immediately made me feel better. That was the end of my first video. There should be another one at the end of the week.